What is up, listeners of the Didn't Ask podcast? Welcome back to episode 45. If this is your first podcast, welcome. Please listen to the other ones. You can find those on anchor.fm/didn't-ask-pod. Plug. If this is your 45th podcast, welcome back. I hope you had a good weekend. I certainly did. I had a productive weekend. Fixed my bike because I had been having many issues with that thing. So fixed that, put a new chain on there. It runs so smoothly now. Man, it looks like I'm riding a new ass bike. So I'm glad I did that. So yeah, again, I hope you had a good weekend. Watched some UFC as well, because UFC is back. It's been a couple of weeks. We're preparing for the big one next week, the unification fight between heavyweights Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane. Who's gonna be the heavyweight of them all? Because man, that is an interesting fight. It's a fight where it's from the top level. It's skill versus power. Is Cyril Gane gonna be fast enough, quick enough, skilled enough to stay out of the hands of Francis Ngannou? And then it's just like, well, Francis Ngannou has that one punch knockout that he likes to use often. So we're gonna see what that's gonna be. And also, we're getting closer and closer to the road to WrestleMania, with the Royal Rumble being less than 2 weeks away now. Very exciting things happening. And if we look even further than that for UFC, going back to that, we have Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker in February. Like, it's crazy. There are so many good fights happening very soon, so many fun events. But again, I say this quite often, basically every episode. This is not a show where I talk to you about my weekend, about WWE, or UFC. No. This is a podcast where I dive into the subreddits to see what the people asked Reddit and didn't ask me. Let's jump into the first question of today, coming from user Blob on a Stick, and they ask, what event in history do you wish there was more footage of? I saw this question and immediately set me thinking, what interesting thing in history do I wish there was more footage of? Of course, I went back very far to see just like, okay, where can we take this? And I ended up with the time Jesus was around. I would love to see how that happened. What made people think that Jesus was this outer world character? Where do the stories come from? Morgan Freeman did a show called The Story of God, and it's a very awesome show that I watched all the way through, and I went back to it multiple times because I think it's the story of God is such an interesting question and like story to tell, to see like where does religion come from and where do we get our touch points from? Because we all know the stories of Jesus, that he could walk on water, he could turn water into wine, you name it. And it's super interesting to have some footage of that, if we could. Like, what did he do? And this is something that kind of funny has mentioned in the past, but it's like, what if Jesus was just a dope ass magician? Like, if we had footage of Jesus turning water into wine, we could, by definition, say, oh, this happened, yes, or it happened because he did this and this. Like, maybe he turned water into wine and it was just water with food coloring that he had on his finger or some shit, and then he put in the water and then became red, and people thought, oh my god, it's wine. Shit like that would be so interesting to learn about and to see Jesus in action, like him walking on water. Maybe that is something that happened once and somebody saw and was just like, oh man, he walked on water. But maybe if we looked at it really well, if we properly looked at it, maybe we see that he just walked on rocks or something like that were in the ocean. Shit like that would be so fucking interesting if you ask me. So, going back to the question asked by Blob on a Stick, what event in history do you wish there was more footage of? For me, it would be just Jesus being alive. There are so many things that are written down in the Bible that we have no explanation for up until this day because we don't know how big Jesus actually was. We don't know what he looked like. We don't know anything really about Jesus. So I would love to see more footage of Jesus where, show him turning water into wine, show him walking on water, show him rising from his grave. Shit like that. I would love to have some footage of that to just put a definitive answer on. First off, like, of course, we know, I believe that Jesus was real, Jesus was a person, but like, in what way was Jesus the way he is being described now as being the Son of God, being the son of a virgin birth, and stuff like that? I would be very interested to see some video footage of that, but that was so long ago that there is no possibility for us to have that. So it would be very fun to see that. Thank you for your question, Blob on a Stick. Moving on to the second question of today, coming from user IT-trader, and they ask, what is something fake that people still believe in? When I saw this question, I was thinking very hard because it's, of course, we have so many things that people believe in. Again, religion is up to you if you think that is fake, yes or no. But when I start thinking properly about this question, I think I ended up with black cats being bad luck. It is widely known that black cats, or at least believed, that black cats are a bad omen, that they bring death and despair, and they're always being mentioned in the same breath as witches and stuff like that. That has real ramifications for the real world. Because you might think that, oh, those are just stories, people don't really believe that. But it is actually scientifically proven, not necessarily scientifically, I guess, but like, it is actually proven that you can, if you look at the number of cats that get adopted from shelters, black cats are always the lowest, and they're always the cats that are, left behind, which is super sad to think about because it's just like, it's a cat, guys. It doesn't matter if it has a different fucking fur. It makes no sense, really, but it still is a thing. So last year, I got to work for a PR company, and they had a campaign working together with our national lottery company, and they launched a campaign where they looked at the numbers of black cats, and they saw like, oh man, the amount of black cats that don't get, adopted is significantly higher than any other thing. So we're gonna shine a spotlight on these cats and make sure that these cats get a nice home, that they can be safe and don't have to shit in a shelter for a long time and then maybe not even survive that. So they did that campaign, and that showed us that, yeah, black cats are still being seen as a evil spirit or a harbinger of doom or something like that. And it is very sad because they're just black cats, guys. It's a cat. Don't worry. I've got two of them, even though mine are black and white. But still, they're black. So going back to the question asked by user IT-trader, what is something fake that people still believe in? And I would say that black cats are a bad omen, because that's definitely not the case. Get yourself a black cat if they are available, because they are gorgeous and they can fill your house with love as much as any other cat can. Thank you for your question, IT Trader. Moving on to the third question of today, coming from user Ezra Music 98. Which movie has the best soundtrack? Ooh-wee! This is an interesting question because we can look at original music and we can also just look at licensed music. But Seeing this question, one soundtrack jumped to mind immediately, and that is of course Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That soundtrack loaded up with fucking amazing songs from Post Malone to Jaden Smith to Nicki Minaj to you name it. It's such a good album that I go back to from time to time just to be like, hey, let me just listen to this for a couple of hours. Like a couple of years ago, like around the time that the movie came out, I would just listen to that song every day at the end of the day of because I was just working so much and because I was interning, I should say that. I was interning and sometimes, when you hit that 4 p.m. in the afternoon where it's just like, oh man, I have to push for one more hour. I'm gonna push, gonna push, gonna push. And then I would just turn on that soundtrack and just push for that last hour, just vibing to that beat. It's so freaking good. But for me, this year, or I should say last year, because we're living in 2022 and it was 2021. Oh. But like last year, one new soundtrack came into my life, and that was, of course, the soundtrack of Tick Tick Boom. The biography, theatrical, musical movie based on the life of Jonathan Larson, filmed by Lin Manuel Miranda, starring Andrew Garfield, has such a fantastic soundtrack. All these numbers are so good and have such a nice story to tell, and it fits so well in the story that they've told. Because, of course, if you don't know, Jonathan Larson is a or was a musical producer, a writer of musicals, and this is the show that he wrote about his experience writing shows. It's very interesting, especially the way of explaining this now. But what it basically is that he did a one man show type show where he went through his story of writing his first show that didn't turn out the way he wanted it to turn out, yada yada yada. So what Lin Manuel Miranda did with fuck, now I forgot his name. I'm sorry, dude. But with the I believe it was the writer, I think it was the writer of Dear Evan Hansen, but I'm not fully sure. They basically adopted that one man show and then formed it into this movie that it is by picking numbers from the one man show and then moving that around in the show themselves so it would fit in the greater story, and then some of them being, of course, again, one man show songs about his life, but then implementing them actually in his life in the movie. And it's very interesting. If you have not seen it, please go watch it because it's a fucking amazing movie and the music is fantastic. Jonathan Larson absolutely did fantastic with that. And Andrew Garfield performed the songs so well that I don't know, I cannot say anything bad about it. There are some songs that I would skip if I would listen to them normally, but that's more because of the emotional baggage that comes with some of these songs. Because again, it's based on a movie, but it's still a musical. So every song has its place in the greater scheme, so to speak. While I'm answering this question, I'm peeking and slightly looking into the comments, and somebody says in the comments, Mama Bear of 3-9 says Tarzan. And of course, Tarzan, the Disney movie, fantastic soundtrack. Phil Collins went so hard on that soundtrack, and as a kid, I listened to that soundtrack from time to time. And man, it's such a good soundtrack, and especially for me because in the Dutch version of Tarzan, they changed a lot, if not all of the songs to a Dutch version of it, and it doesn't hit as hard. So switching it to the English version so that you get the Phil Collins version, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So going back to the question asked by user Ezra Music 98, which movie has the best soundtrack? And again, I cannot pinpoint one. I have to say, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has a fantastic soundtrack, an absolute must listen. Then I would say Tick Tick Boom, absolutely fantastic work done by Jonathan Larson, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and the writer, I believe, of Dear Evan Hansen. It's such a fantastic way that they showcase the story and honor the person that is Jonathan Larson. And three, Tarzan, I'm gonna go with Mama Bear of 3-9 here because Tarzan has such an amazing score. Again, Phil Collins didn't need to go that hard on that score. Thank you for your question, Astro Music. Moving on to the fourth question of today, coming from user perpetually cold underscore, and they ask, say Pokemon are real. Is it ethical to eat them? Who would be the tastiest? If I start thinking about this question, of course, let's start with the first part of the question. Say Pokemon are real. Is it ethical to eat them? And I would say, why not? Why not? Why would it be unethical to eat Pokemon? I guess because they're more sub they have a better subconscious. I don't why. We eat chickens, we eat cows, we eat pigs, we eat fish. Why does it have to change? You know what I mean? I still think that we will make a distinction in what Pokemon we would eat and what Pokemon we won't eat. Because I don't think people are waiting in line to eat a Houndoom or a Houndour or something. Or a Arcanine. I don't think people are waiting in line to eat those. But maybe people want to eat a Lobunny. Maybe people want to eat a Pachirisu. Maybe. I don't know. But if I go back to the question and look at the second part of the question, who would be the tastiest? And the obvious answer would be Miltank. It's an absolutely tasty looking. It's a cow, but it kind of looks like a pig in some ways. It's very thick. It has the milk others. It must be. It must be the tastiest animal. And if I'm wrong, I don't want to be right. You know what I'm saying? So, going back to the question asked by perpetually cold underscore, say Pokemon are real, is it ethical to eat them? Who would be the tastiest? And again, of course it would be ethical to eat them. They're just animals, I guess. We eat animals now, so why the fuck wouldn't we eat those? And then second part, who would be the tastiest? And I would say Miltank, because it's a thick cow that is pink and looks like a fucking cow got doused in a milkshake. So it's gonna be tasty. And again, if I'm wrong, I don't want to be right. Thank you for your question, perpetually cold underscore. Moving on to the final question of today, coming from user Broody Batman, and they ask, you can have $1 billion, but you can never get drunk or high ever again. Are you interested? Why or why not? This is a very easy question for me. I don't really understand why I'm waiting to answer this, because if you have listened to this podcast for long enough, and I hope you did, and if not, please go back to the older episodes because they're pretty good. If you ask me, they're pretty good. And the host is pretty good. If you ask me, it's pretty good. Well, yeah, would I get $1 billion if I would never be able to get drunk or high again? And again, this is not like a physical thing that is missing now that I cannot get drunk or high, because that seems like a fucking cheat. Just be like, okay, I can drink whatever the fuck I want and smoke whatever the fuck I want, and I get $1 billion. That seems like a fucking cheat code. But no, this is of course that you will never be able to have those things again and again. What I wanted to say is, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know that I don't drink or do drugs. So for me, this is the easiest answer ever. This is just free money. If somebody came up to me and was like, okay, you can never drink alcohol or smoke marijuana in your life, but you can get $1 billion right now, I'll be like, yes, please, please, yes, sir, I'm fine, thank you. And then I would be a fucking billionaire and I would say, suck my dick. No, I would be buying a lot of shit because $1 billion is immensely, there's a lot of money. So, yeah, going back to the question asked by user Broody Batman, you can have $1 billion, but you can never get drunk or high ever again. Are you interested? Yes, of course I'm interested. Because I don't drink or do drugs. So for me, this is just free money. It's just free money. I do this for free right now. I'll rather get paid $1 billion for it. Thank you for your question, Broody Batman. And now we move on to the final question of today, coming from the Am I the Asshole subreddit as by user notice-at 2018. And they ask, am I the asshole for interrupting my ex-husband's birthday and taking my daughter home because she was there without consent? Me, a 35-year-old female, and my ex-husband, 37-year-old male, got separated 1 year ago and share custody of our 15-year-old daughter. My ex-husband has her for certain days, and his birthday didn't fall on one of these days. In fact, it fell on one of the days where my daughter is supposed to be with me. He called me so he could discuss letting him have my daughter on the day of his birthday, but I told him no because it is not his day to have her. He got my daughter involved and she said she really wanted to go, but I said no because I have my reasons. My ex-husband dropped it, but on the day of his birthday, I went to pick up my daughter up from school, but I discovered that he came and took her straight to the restaurant where his birthday party was taking place. I was fuming. I called him, but he didn't pick up. I then called my daughter and she said she was with him. I used her location feature to track her phone and got the address. I showed up and interrupted the party. My ex-husband started arguing with me, but I told him he had no consent to have my daughter with him that day, but he said my daughter wanted to be there for his birthday. My former mother-in-law tried to speak to me and I told her to stay out of it, then told my daughter to grab her stuff because we were going home. My ex-husband and his family unloaded on me and I tried to ignore them and just leave, but my daughter made it hard for me. I took her home eventually and grounded her for agreeing to leave school with her dad when it wasn't his day. Her dad called me yelling about how bitter and spiteful I was to deprive my daughter from attending his birthday. I told him it's basic respect and boundaries, but he claimed it was just me being spiteful and deliberately hurtful towards him, that I didn't even care how it affected my daughter. I hung up, but more of his family members started blasting me on social media, saying I showed up and made a scene at the restaurant. Went as far as calling me unstable. Am I the asshole? And the simple question here, notice. Yes, you're the asshole. You're talking about the ex-husband, going over boundaries and yada yada yada, while you go over boundaries yourself. You're first off tracking your daughter's phone, and that is fucked up. I can see in the situation where you want to pick your daughter up from school and she's gone because her dad took her. I can understand that that is a weird situation to be in, and I can on one side understand that you want to make sure that your daughter is okay, but it seems that it never sprung to mind that your daughter is a person here too, and your daughter isn't 6 or she's not a 5-year-old girl that can barely care for herself. Your daughter is 15 years old. So in this case, you should have just asked the daughter to be like, hey, your dad is celebrating his birthday on Tuesday. Do you want to go? And the simple answer would be yes. And then if that is the answer, then there's nothing for you to do. And the fact is that what you're doing is totally pity. It's an absolute pity move. Because if your birthday would fall on one of the days that he had your daughter and you would do the same thing, you would be pissed too. that you wouldn't have your daughter on your birthday because it's once a year. You only celebrate your birthday once a year. So if the daughter wants to be at the fucking birthday party, let your daughter be at the fucking birthday party, bro. And don't track her fucking phone. She's a 15-year-old kid. Give her some fucking privacy. God damn. So, going back to the question asked by user notice-at 2018. Am I the asshole for interrupting my ex-husband's birthday and taking my daughter home because she was there without consent? And I would say, yes. In no fucking point during this story have you asked your daughter, or at least told about asking your daughter, if she wanted to go to the birthday party. Because that is the only answer that really matters in this case. If the husband asks you, hey, is it fine if we switch the fucking days around for once this week? And the daughter goes, yes, I really would like to go to my dad's birthday, then that's the end of the fucking conversation. You're not sending your kid to fucking Palestine or fucking Syria. You're sending it to a dad, and it seems that even though you don't really have a good relationship with each other anymore, it doesn't seem like he is the fucking bad guy in this case. So yes, you're the asshole. Thanks for your question anyways. And this was it for the Didn't Ask podcast for this week. I hope you had a good time, and if you do, please leave a rating on Apple Podcast or any other podcast service where you can leave a rating on this podcast. You can find all the podcast platforms this podcast is on by going to anchor.fm/didn't-ask-pod. Over here, you can find all these wonderful links to all your favorite podcast services around the world. On this website, you can also find a text box that says message. This gives you the ability to record a voice memo to ask your question to me personally. Your voice will be heard on this podcast, and if you don't really want that, that's fine by me. Say it up front, and then I will just read your question out myself so you don't have to hear your voice live on air. If you want to know what I'm doing in the next couple of days, in the coming week, you can go to tracked.tv, and that link will be in the show description. Over on Tracked, you will be able to see all the shows and movies that I'm watching throughout the week, so you can keep up with that and maybe even ask a question about those shows. Well, that was gonna be it for me for this week. I hope to see you back next week. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.